Hello, bosses. Welcome back to Boss Economic World, the only place where we dissect the global economy so you don't have to dissect your wallet. Today is November 20th, 2025. Take a look at this box. 3 years ago, this box would have flown from Shenzhen to Los Angeles in 48 hours, cost me $3 in shipping, and contained a gadget I didn't need but bought because it was cheaper than a sandwich. Today? This box took a tour of Vietnam, a layover in Mexico, got slapped with a tariff that costs more than the item inside, and arrived 2 weeks late. Why? Because the world isn't just changing, it has officially snapped. We are looking at a report fresh out of the Bloomberg New Economy Forum in Singapore that dropped today. The CEO of FedEx, Raj Subramaniam, and the Chairman of ABB, Peter Voser, just handed us the roadmap to the new economic reality. And spoiler alert, the era of hyper-globalization is dead. It's buried in the backyard. And we are now living in the era of the regional fortress. If you think this is just boring logistics talk, think again. This is about why your inflation is sticky, why the stock market is schizophrenic, and why FedEx is losing $1 billion just to tell us the truth. Buckle up, bosses. Let's restore the full picture. Let's start with the heavy hitter. FedEx. If the global economy is a human body, logistics companies like FedEx are the circulatory system. They know you're sick before you even cough. When blood flow stops to a certain limb, they feel it first. Raj Subramaniam, the CEO of FedEx, dropped a bombshell in Singapore today. He said, and I quote, "There's a new equilibrium state being formed in this new supply chain pattern and they're much more regional in nature. The industrial economy is going to take a little longer to change. But once it changes, it's difficult to go back." Translation? Don't hold your breath waiting for 2019 to come back. FedEx warned us back in September, just 2 months ago, that they were expecting a $1 billion hit this year. Why? Because trade volatility is eating their lunch. Specifically, the golden route shipping high-value goods from China to the US has dried up faster than a puddle in Phoenix. For 30 years, the economic model was simple: make it in China, put it on a plane, sell it in America. It was efficient. It was cheap. It was the old equilibrium. The new equilibrium Raj is talking about? It's messy. It's fragmented. And it is regional. Raj noted that while flows from China to the US are tanking, flows from China to Europe and Latin America are surging. FedEx is currently scrambling to redeploy their aircraft. Imagine trying to parallel park a fleet of Boeing 777s, that's essentially what they are doing operationally. They are moving capacity because, as Raj put it, we can move our capacity far faster than manufacturing can move. So we know from the bottom up, we see these signals and we can react. FedEx is the speedboat. Manufacturing is the Titanic. It takes years to build a factory, but only days to reroute a plane. FedEx is moving the planes. The factories are still turning the wheel. Now, let's address the elephant in the room. Or rather, the orange elephant. President Donald Trump. Whether you love him or hate him, his trade policies in 2024 and 2025 have fundamentally rewritten the rules of the game. We aren't just talking about standard tariffs anymore. We are talking about the death of the de minimis exemption. Let's do a quick economics 101 for those who don't speak trade lawyer. The loophole, until recently, under Section 321 of the Trade Act of 1930, if you shipped a package worth less than $800 into the US Customs didn't look at it. No tariffs. No taxes. Minimal inspection. This was the de minimis rule. The exploit, companies like Shine and Temu built entire empires on this. They didn't ship containers of t-shirts, they shipped millions of individual packages directly to your doorstep, each worth $15. They bypassed the tariffs that Walmart and Target had to pay. The smackdown, in 2025, the Trump administration, looking to protect domestic manufacturing and close the budget deficit, killed the exemption for Chinese goods. Boom. Overnight, that $10 dress has a 60% tariff and a customs processing fee. This is what Raj meant when he said the end of the exemption has upended global parcel trade. It didn't just slow it down, it decapitated the business model of direct-to-consumer cross-border retail. The result? The volume of small parcels flying across the Pacific collapsed. FedEx's planes are flying lighter. And when planes fly light, profits crash. But here is the nuance that most news outlets miss: the trade didn't disappear, it just got more expensive and complicated. So, if we aren't shipping from China to the US, what are we doing? We are entering the age of regionalization. Think of the world as breaking into 3 distinct blocks. 1. The Americas fortress, USA, Mexico, Canada. 2. The Eurozone, linked increasingly to Eastern Europe and parts of Asia. 3. Asia Major, China, ASEAN, and India trading internally. Raj Subramaniam pointed out that FedEx is seeing more flows from China to Latin America. Why? Because Chinese companies aren't stupid. If they can't ship directly to the US, they ship components to Mexico, assemble them there, and truck them across the border to claim they are made in Mexico. This is the whack-a-mole game of global economics. You hit China with a hammer, the trade pops up in Vietnam. You hit Vietnam, it pops up in Monterrey, Mexico. But this reshuffling is expensive. And this brings us to our second guest star, Peter Voser, the chairman of ABB Limited. For those who don't know, ABB makes the robots and heavy electrical equipment that actually run the world's factories. When ABB speaks, you listen, because they know who is buying the machines to build the new factories. Peter dropped a truth bomb at the same panel in Singapore. Companies across the world, in all industries, are taking much more into account that the disruption effect is much more costly compared to actually keeping your product on the inventory side. Let's break that down. From 1990 to 2020, the god of business was just in time. The goal: hold zero inventory. Have the part arrive at the factory exactly 1 minute before you screw it onto the car. The result: maximum efficiency, maximum profit. Then COVID happened. Then the Suez Canal got blocked by a boat. Then the Red Sea got blocked by missiles. Then the Trade War 2.0 started. Suddenly, just in time became out of stock. Now, in late 2025, the new god is just in case. The goal: resilience. The result: you build warehouses. You stockpile chips. You hoard raw materials. Peter Voser is telling us that companies have done the math. It is cheaper to pay for a warehouse full of unused parts than it is to shut down your assembly line for 3 weeks because of a tariff war or a geopolitical spat. But here is the kicker for you, the consumer: resilience is expensive. Efficiency drives prices down. Redundancy drives prices up. Who pays for that warehouse? Who pays for shipping raw materials from China to Mexico instead of directly to Los Angeles? You do. Now, the hopeful among you might be thinking, well, boss, maybe this is temporary. Maybe in 2028, trade relations will thaw, and we go back to cheap shipping. Let me stop you right there. Raj Subramaniam said something chillingly accurate: the industrial economy is going to take a little longer to change. But once it changes, it's difficult to go back. This is the concept of economic hysteresis. Think about it. If Apple spends $5 billion building a supply chain in India and Vietnam, and Ford spends $10 billion building EV battery plants in Kentucky and Tennessee to avoid tariffs, they aren't going to tear those factories down just because the political wind changes in 4 years. These are sunk costs. We are pouring concrete. We are training workforces. We are signing 10-year logistics contracts. The supply chain isn't a rubber band that snaps back. It's more like Play-Doh. Once you squash it into a new shape, it stays there. This new equilibrium Raj talks about is structural. It means 1. Higher structural inflation, making things in Mexico or the US costs more than in China. Period. 2. Higher inventory levels, which ties up corporate cash, leading to slightly lower stock buybacks. 3. More complex geopolitics, companies now have to have a foreign policy department. Peter Voser noted that trade disruptions weren't following election cycles, but rather reflect fundamental changes in the market. He's right. This isn't just about Trump. The Europeans are putting up carbon border taxes. The Indians are protecting their manufacturing. The Chinese are pivoting to the global south. The era of free trade wasn't killed by one election, it died of natural causes because the world decided that security efficiency. Let's look at the numbers supporting this, so you know I'm not just fear-mongering. The FedEx $1 billion hit, this isn't just a rounding error. When a company that size loses that much specifically due to trade volatility, it implies a double-digit percentage drop in trans-Pacific volume. Capacity shift: FedEx moving aircraft to Europe and Latin America correlates with data showing Mexico has surpassed China as the US's top trading partner. But here is the catch: Mexico imports a massive amount of parts from China. The supply chain didn't shorten, it just added a stopover. That stopover adds cost. Inventory ratios: look at the balance sheets of major retailers in Q3 2025. Inventory to sales ratios are climbing. They are holding more stock. Voser is right. The inventory tax is the new cost of doing business. So, we have FedEx moving planes, ABB building resilient factories, and politicians erecting tariff walls. What is the actionable advice for us? 1. The cheap crap era is over. If your business model relies on dropshipping cheap plastic goods from Alibaba to Amazon FBA, you are a dinosaur. The comet has already hit. The removal of de minimis and the tariff hikes mean the margins are gone. 2. Invest in the fixers. Logistics companies are hurting now because they are in the transition phase. But in the long run? Complexity is good for logistics. If a supply chain is simple, anyone can do it. If a supply chain involves navigating tariffs, stopovers in Mexico, and warehousing in Vietnam, you need high-end experts. Once FedEx and UPS finish redeploying, they will charge a premium for this complexity. 3. Automation is king. If we are moving manufacturing to high-cost regions, we can't afford high labor costs. We need robots. Peter Voser's ABB is sitting pretty. If you can't use cheap Chinese labor, you use an expensive Swiss robot. Long ABB, Rockwell, and Fanuc. 4. Expect regional products. We might see a fragmentation of products. The iPhone you buy in Europe might have totally different internal components than the one in the US, because they are sourced from different regional blocks to avoid tariffs. To wrap this up, let's look at the big picture. FedEx and ABB are telling us the same story from two different angles. FedEx sees the flow changing. ABB sees the structure changing. Both agree on one thing: we are not going back. The global economy of 2025 is not a global village. It is a series of gated communities. It is safer, sure. It is more resilient, yes. But the HOA fees are going to be astronomical. Raj Subramaniam says the industrial economy is slow to turn, but once it turns, it's set. The wheel has turned. The ship is heading in a new direction. As investors and consumers, we have to stop betting on a return to 2019. We have to play the hand we are dealt in 2025. That means betting on automation, betting on regional logistics, and accepting that the days of the $3 toaster are gone for good. This is the new truth. It's messy, it's expensive, but at least now, you see the full picture. I'm the boss. Keep your supply chains resilient, and I'll see you in the next video.